Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of run-down no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sighting started in the mid-'70s. The first experience I had, I was walking a friend of mine's girlfriend home. This is around 2:30 at night, and this is up in the White Mountains of Arizona. I had walked about a half a mile or so, and we kept walking past this one area and said goodnight to her. She went in, and I started walking back down the street. As I was coming up to this one area, these one dogs had started just raising hell, and they had, almost attacked us before, come right up to the road, and, they're pretty vicious sounding. And this particular night, they were just raising hell on the other side of this house. So as I was getting closer, I started crossing the road. And this is a little 2-lane road back in Arizona. It's, pretty popular now, but back then in the 70s, it wasn't. Nobody on the road. So I started crossing the road. About halfway across the road and halfway past the house, the dogs on the other side of the house just went silent. Not a sound. Nothing. And I just kept walking. I thought that was kind of odd, but I just, okay, keep going. I got past the house, probably about 20, 30 feet past the house, and this creature started roaring. The vibration was going through my body. It was so loud. It was like I was standing in front of a concert speaker, and it was probably 50 yards off the road in these trees, probably about 30, 40 feet up in the trees. And the vibration, it was just, and it didn't stop. The roaring, it kept going for like 20 seconds maybe. And just this pissed off roar. I mean, it was one of the loudest things I've ever heard except for a concert. And I've been in some pretty loud houses with some big speakers, but nothing like this where the vibration went through your body. It was amazing. And something just told me, don't run, just keep walking. And after it stopped roaring, it stopped. Never heard the dogs again. And I kept walking. I had to go down this little hill, and then I heard something on my left. And it was probably about 20 feet, 30 feet off the road to my left. And I could hear it. And I just kept walking. And then pretty soon I heard something on my right side moving pretty quickly. And there's more trees and little cabins on the right, so it had more coverage. And then I could hear it, but it was in front of me, like 30 or 40 yards in front of me and to my right. So it was staying ahead of me where I was going. And it's a little road. There's nowhere else to go. I got up to where the main road crosses it, little highway, and I could hear it across the street, across the highway. And it's a little 2-lane highway back then. And it was behind this little post office, and there's gravel back there. And it's lit up, but I could never see it there's little gaps between the couple of buildings. I could hear it moving, but I couldn't see it. And I could just make out the sounds because there's no other sounds at 3:00 in the morning out there. And I just kept going and walking. Our restaurant was right on the main road, and we lived in a big double wide trailer behind the restaurant. And I lived in the barn, was remodeled into an apartment. So I got into my apartment, and I'm 14. I was just turned 15, I think then, maybe a few months after. And I had a little 22 rifle. I threw about 15 shells into that. And I'm like, this isn't going to do anything against this kind of a creature. And I just tossed it on the bed like nothing. And I just who do I call? I mean, the Forest Service, the game warden. I'm thinking about, waking up my dad. He's a Navy man and he has some big guns, but I'm not going to wake up my dad at 3 a.m. at 3:30 and say, "Hey, Dad, I'm not sure what I heard," but so I didn't do that. I didn't get hardly any sleep that night. And first thing in the morning, I went back out there by myself and I went over to those trees where they were and I walked out into them. And the first thing I noticed was one of the trees, probably about as big around as I could reach my arms around, halfway around a tree. That's how big this pine tree was. And halfway around the bottom of that tree, all the pine needles have been pushed away. About 5 or 6 inches deep, all the pine needles were pushed away around half of that tree at the base of it. So I'm trying to figure out maybe when it was coming down, it was reaching for the ground with its foot and pushing away, or it was looking for something. I don't know, but that was there. I saw a couple of, trees that had been pushed over that were like broken off, not just pushed over, not uprooted, pushed over, but snapped off. And these were substantial type trees. They weren't little ones. So I'm like, all right. And I said, well, let me go down this hill down into next to the road that I was walking before. So I walked down in that field and I come across this big mound of grass, probably, thicker than a double mattress of a bed, and it was probably about 25, 30 feet long. And I look, and about 8 or 10 feet out is a footprint. It's sunk down about 10 inches into this mound of grass. And it's the right foot of this creature. And you can see the outline. You can see, the toe shape. And this is in dead grass, but it was like huge, like 22 or 3 inches long and just massive. But that wasn't it. About 8 to 10 feet past that were 2 footprints, both feet. So I think it was tracking me or catching up to me on my left. And it sunk with that first foot. And its instinct was when you sink, 10 inches down, when you don't expect that, is to land on both feet. And they were perfect. Left and right foot, huge. A little bit of a, pigeon toe, but not much. And they were huge. And then no other footprint after that. So I think that's what I heard when it was moving to my left. So I said, all right, I'm looking around the area and I look up in the corner of the field and I see like 2 trees up in that corner. So, all right, I'll just walk up that way. And I didn't go on the other side of the road because I knew it was over on that side too. But that morning, I didn't. I went toward these 2 trees. And as I'm getting closer, I'm looking like, wow, that one tree is like perfectly straight pine tree, about 65, 70 feet tall, beautiful pine tree. Next to it is another pine tree, but it goes up about 4 or 5 feet and bends at a 90-degree angle and then bends up and then bends again at a 90-degree angle to the left and then bends again going up. It did this like 3 or 4 times on the way up on this tree. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, whoa, I've never seen, I've seen Indian markers on trees, but nothing like this. This is different. And I look up there and I see this sap dripping from right toward the top of the tree. And it's, coming out pretty good. I'm like, whoa, that's weird. I know, pine sap, but that just didn't look right. And I'm 15 years old. So I hop up on the tree and I climb up. I was standing on the last branch that would support my weight. And I'm about 110 pounds at that time. And it's about a 2-inch branch that I'm standing on. And I'm about 3 feet away from reaching where the sap was being dug or clawed at. It was above my reach that far. So this creature had to have been standing there and digging the sap up at the top. There's no way it could have, stood any farther up unless it was straddling the tree. There was just no more branches that would support its weight. So that was very odd. And I come down a little bit and I could sit on one of these L-shaped branches and I could see all over, but I was kind of hidden by that other tree. So it was really probably like a vantage point for either them a hunting party or just to, see cars and people going by or what's going on in the area, like a sentry kind of spot. So I started talking to some of my friends and different neighbors and about this. And they started talking to me about Bigfoot. And so then I knew what it was. Because in the beginning, I'm like, what is this, a huge ogre? Or, I'd heard about Bigfoot years ago when I lived in California, but never crossed my mind, at that point, that night. It was just a massive creature. That's all I knew. So then I started interviewing a few different people, Penrod family and different, families that had lived up there for years and different Indians. And the Indians would tell me stories about the Bigfoot tracking them or trailing about 150 yards to their side and keeping pace with their horses going down the mountains or up the mountains. No problems with them keeping up, but they would be off to the side. Like, I don't know, they're shadowing them or keeping an eye to protect them. That's kind of the feeling that they were getting, or I was getting from the stories that they were telling me. That it wasn't an aggressive overseeing of the Indians or the humans. It was more of a protective state that they were doing. So the next time I was in that particular area, my friend lived like in the last house on the right of this little street. And this is right near that same region. And I said goodbye to him and his wife and their dog. And I said, I'm going to go down to the lake. So I said goodbye and walked out that way. And their dog followed me. Dog was like half shepherd, half wolf. A good dog. It was a girl named Wolfie. So she's about 20 feet in front of me, and we're walking toward the lake. And all of a sudden, I hear that same style roar. And it's that same pissed off kind of roar. It's just raising hell, and it's straight in front of me toward the lake. And the dog is in front of me, like I said, about 20 feet in front of me. She stopped and jerked her head back at me like, she had heard that many times, or she knew what that was. And I just took off running toward it as fast as I could. I was pushing off of rocks, off of tree branches, anything I could just get speed, anything I could run as fast as I could. I'm looking up in trees, I'm glancing side to side, but I'm just concentrating on running as fast as I can and not, falling or, breaking my neck. There's a lot of cinder rocks and things out there. But I was running. I got to the clearing of the trees and I'm out of breath. I'm like, okay, where do I go? What do I do? And I don't see it. I check behind me and I don't see it in the woods. So I'm like, it had to have gone toward the water, in the water. So I glance at an angle and I take my time and I walk toward the water to the right. And I'm following the beach of the lake. And I'm about 10 feet or 15 feet away from the shore. And I'm walking along and all of a sudden I see this mud like sticking up. And this is like 50 feet away. So I not really know what it is yet. But it's sticking up about 15, 16 inches above the ground. It looks like mud. Like, what is that? And I get closer and closer and closer. And I get up to it where I can look almost into it yet. And it's the front half of its foot pushed down into the mud. And it sunk down about 8 inches deep. And it was the right foot because I could see the toes and the shape of everything. There was no claws on these toes. And the weight of this creature going that last step into this mud pushed all that excess mud 2 inches thick and about 6-7 inches wide straight up the middle of its foot up into the air with the pressure. And it was like 15 feet above the ground and curling back toward the shore. The mud was. And when I got there, the water was just starting to seep through the mud into the print. So, it was very clear. There was nothing, no no mistaking what it was. But like I say, it had to have been only the front mid-tarsal forward of the foot. Because, I mean, I didn't know that then, but I figured it was just the toes and whatever was bent. And all that weight pushed it up right up the middle of its foot. And that's what made it so flat. It was flat, coming straight up and then curling toward the shore. So it did that last step and must have dove into the water from there. And this is the strangest part about this. After I got this calm, knowing feeling, I didn't get scared at all about the footprint. It didn't bother me at all. It's like I already knew. I got this knowing feeling in my heart. Calm. And I turned and I took 2 steps, and I don't remember the 3rd step. I don't remember that day. I don't remember the rest of that night. I, remember the next day, but I didn't bring somebody back out there. I didn't talk to anybody about it for, a few days even after. It didn't even come into my mind for a couple of days. So I think I might have experienced something, but it might have been blocked out of my mind. I don't know. Could have been, I took 2 steps and it was standing on the shore. I don't know. But it was something that was too traumatic for me to remember. Or I don't know. I couldn't have blacked out as far as passed out because I wasn't covered in mud or anything like that. It was just strange. I was thinking about doing a hypnosis session to maybe go back in a regression to maybe find out. But that's for another day. So, all right, let me tell you on another happenings that happened. My friend Johnny and I were traveling along a cinder road, and he wanted to show me a fishing spot where he and a friend had found a cave, and they believed that Bigfoot roared in his face in this cave. Him and his friend were going fishing, and it was kind of at a peak of this cliff area that goes down to the river. It's about, I'd say 30 feet above the plateau, and then it goes down to the river, the crevice for the river. So these guys were climbing down into that area to go fishing, and he actually slid down this rock into the cave. I've been there, so I know how that could have happened. Coming scaling down the wall, there's this flat rock that's kind of leaning out a little bit, and if you hit it, you just slide right down into the cave, about 5 feet down. And it's a bigger opening to the side once you're down there, but not from where you would have slid in, just enough, So he said when he was there, they had a Bic lighter. And they got into there and they could see this kind of like a bed-shaped shelf along the one wall. And I've seen this. It's kind of like a thick mattress, but it's only about a width of a twin-size bed. But it goes for about 8 or 10, 12 feet along the one wall. It's very pronounced like a shelf. Very odd. And there was a few carcasses of birds and other things in the cave when I saw it and when Johnny was there prior. He said they were fresher then, of course. But at this time, they weren't. So Johnny and his friend, they had a Bic lighter, and they're going toward the back of the cave, and it's not very high. It's only about 3.5, 4 feet. I'd say 4.5 feet, maybe. So you can stand, but you have to crouch. So as he was crouching, going toward the back of the cave, something roared in his face. Johnny's a, pretty big guy, but he said he ran over his friend getting out of the cave. He turned and ran over him. His friend got out. He was white as a ghost, and they just dropped and ran and got out of there, the car, and took off after they climbed out and did all that. So when I went back, I could examine the cave a little bit. But of course, we had a Bic lighter. We didn't have any flashlights. We weren't prepared, but I could see a little bit. We went around this pinnacle kind of shaped rock toward the back of the cave. I went around it to the right, and there was this gap along the back wall. It was probably about almost an inch gap along the whole bottom of the back wall. And I could hear this gusts of wind like a cavern. I've been to Carlsbad Cavern and other caverns, and you hear this whistling from the winds. Just a it's a huge cavern back there. And with that plateau above, it definitely can or was, So I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This might be a way in, blah, blah, blah. But of course, with the Bic lighter, you're not going to try and I'm not going to push this thing open with a Bic lighter or try it. But I'd like to get back there and see, or maybe get some equipment to see how big that cavern is before we even go in, send some drone in there or something like that. But that was a pretty nice little area. Let me see, third or fourth. Okay. Let's finish up in Arizona before I move out of that state. Let's see. Now, there was a couple of times where we had camped out in these woods, and we would just drive our Nova right kind of through the woods a little bit, and camp out just in the middle of nowhere. We'd barbecuing, and we'd hear these low growl, but it wasn't an aggressive growl. It was kind of a moan. I would call it a moan almost, but it wasn't pronounced. But you knew they were around, but it was like they never bothered us. My friend used to joke, I was like, "Oh, Glenn, they have your scent. Don't worry about it. They probably pass your scent around to each other," or joking, but they knew us. And we had no problems. We never felt fear around, where their areas are or were. We didn't have any fear. We didn't have any reason to. And no one else did either. I mean, I think there's enough sightings that they didn't bother anybody. They weren't interested in humans. They wanted to stay away and just live their lives in peace and tranquility. Don't have to worry about cell phone or technology. And this is in the 70s. I didn't have that. But it was pretty interesting. So when I moved from Arizona, I took probably, a few years out of the whole Bigfoot world, and that I had a lot going on in my life and jobs and raising my kids and that. Ended up moving to Connecticut. Met my girl from Connecticut and moved to Pennsylvania eventually. After my boys were, 14, 15, they were getting a little older, I started getting back into Bigfoot. Well, my brother and I were going camping, and we were going from two different areas, and we're going to meet in the middle. So this is in, 2018 when this happened. So 2018, in the Hickory Run area of Pennsylvania, I was on my way to meet him. I was going to get there probably about a half an hour, 45 minutes before he was. So I'm just cruising along in my RAV4, and I see a little 2-track off the road. And I'm like, oh, and I backed up and I turned down it. Just, check it out. And it was near the highway and near the freeway, going under an underpass. And it was just like a little muddy cul-de-sac. It wasn't really anything there on the trail. So it was kind of like a turnaround maybe years ago that they didn't use anymore, because it was like half covered in water on one side. It wasn't deep, but just enough mud, You see a little bit of a 2-track off to my right. So all right. So I kind of drove that way, and the track kind of ended, but I kind of kept going to where it was, a little bit farther, it was shady. And I'm like, okay. And I passed a couple little trees. I passed this other tree, and there's a tree laying down, and it had been cut up on the right-hand side, all the small stuff, but the bigger part was still there, still attached to this huge, it was originally a 4-pronged tree, not a titan, but a 4 huge stem tree. And this one big part of the stem broke off. So it was still like attached 3 feet off the ground and then sloping down probably about 30 feet. And as I just got past that, there I saw, it was like all these sticks weaved kind of bizarrely on the one side of this tree that had fallen, and a few on the other side, but not many. And I said, wow, that's definitely looks, Squatch or Bigfooty. I'm like, so I got out and I walk over, and as I'm walking over, I see this like hair covered area, like enough area of like 2 big king size mattresses, end to end, like a 20-foot long area of hair, just like shedding this small, short hair all over. And then I see this huge plop, and there was 2 big plops. The smaller plop was as big as my hand stretched out, because there's big leaves there, and you could see the leaves. They were as big as my hand. And then the bigger plop was probably, I'd say, about 2 inches thick and about 8 inches around. This was the gelatinous, I have pictures of it, but it was just very odd looking, a lot of different things in it, And so I took pictures of that, and I took pictures of this sticks all over these, this one area. And I got back in the SUV and I drove to the campsite, and my brother, and we set up camp, and I drove him back there because I wanted to check it out more. And then we're looking around, and he didn't want to go deep into these laurels. These mountain laurels here in Pennsylvania are so thick that you can't see 10 feet into them. The leaves are green all year long. In the wintertime, I've been up there, and it's like an ice crystal house. You can have half an inch of ice on these leaves, and they're just bright green. You hit the leaves and they're fine. The ice just falls off. They're so sturdy, they don't even break. They're just amazing. And then they flower in the summer and, spring and all the times of year. But they're so thick, you can't see through them. So I know they're in this area. So I brought my friends back there a couple of different times. AG and I have been hiking around that area for about a year and a half, maybe. And this particular afternoon, I decided to take a couple other people with me. So AG is one of my, head lead, counterparts. He has his own, region in the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Project here with us. And so we took us and Stephanie and her boyfriend, AJ, and myself. We all drove to that location. This is around, 2:00 in the afternoon, probably. We got there. And we decided to hike down through these laurels. And you have to really know your sense of direction, because you can get lost in these very easily. So I would take, mental pictures of these trees above us going out. So when you're coming back, you can kind of guide yourself by these taller trees if you need to. And we hiked down there, at least 2 hours, looking for signs, looking for breaks, looking for any kind of evidence. And we found little bits. There was a couple of blinds that, it looked like they might be able to, run deer into an area, and, deer couldn't get out. It was kind of one of those type of things. Like, we went into it and we had to kind of scale a fallen tree to get our way out, or we go back the way we came, but we wanted to keep going. So we did. And so coming back when we got out, but it's like, that's something that just it didn't seem natural to have that many trees kind of arranged in a way on the trail. Like, you're running down this trail through these maze of laurels, and all of a sudden it's like a barricade, it's like a stop. So I told the people, I said, why don't we let this area cool down a little bit? Let's let this area calm down, and we'll hike out and drive to another area for an hour or so, let it cool down. Everybody agreed. So we hiked back out, hopped in the SUV, and drove to another area that's more public hiking area. So we went down toward the hiking area, toward the waterfall. And instead of going toward where most of the people go, we turned left and went upriver. And as we did that, or up creek, it's not a big river, but as we did that, we got to a place, we're going over these like Humpty Dumps, I call them, up and down 5 or 6 feet or so. And we got a place where we could cross onto the creek into a little island. So we crossed this creek onto the island, and there's about, I don't know, 3 or 4 foot gap in the water on both sides of this little island. As we're walking along, we come across a footprint. And this is a kid-sized footprint. It's, I would say, probably around a size 7 boy's foot, but it's sunk down almost an inch. We're looking at it, we take footprints, or we take photographs of it, and we're all looking at it. And AJ is about 235, 240 pounds. He stepped next to that print, and he only sunk in about 1/8 of an inch. So with that much weight, we estimated possibly around 400 pounds that the print maybe was carrying something, or actual weight, I don't know. But for that small of a print to be that heavy, that's abnormal. Even if it jumped down there, but there was really nowhere to jump down to it. So we kept hiking. I'm usually in the lead or in the back when we're, have newbies with us. So I was in the trail in the back after we found the print. I was in the front in the beginning. So now I'm in the rear. AJ is leading, and we're continuing on the path that we're going on the middle of this island. All of a sudden, I don't know, maybe a minute later, we came across that same footprint going the same direction, which doesn't make sense. Like there was something that put us back in that same spot. So that was kind of odd. So I said, all right, whoa, guys. All right, let's stop right here. Follow me. I'm guiding us back out. So I went back out. We crossed back over where we originally came in and back all the way up to the vehicle. And then we drove back over to where the other area was. At that point, it was starting to get dark. So I decided to back in because it's a little bit muddy over there, as I mentioned. So I backed into this area, and it was pretty close to where that fallen tree was, where the episode had happened. So we were talking, and the mountain laurels are so huge. They're like 15, 20 feet in the air, and they're so thick. At one point, I had walked out toward one of the areas, and right before that, I told Stephanie to say a few things. And she goes, well, I don't know what to say. And I'm like, well, just, if they can hear you, just kind of put their mind at ease. Tell them you're not here to hurt them. You're just here to witness or talk to them or communicate in any way. We're not here to bother them. Just say a few things. So she started doing that. And I walked out toward where the one trail where the water kind of leads down the hill, not the trail where we hiked down earlier. This is the other trail that you can go down, which is kind of the water path where it goes down. So I didn't have a flashlight, and they're shining the light on me. So my reflection, my shadow, is shining onto the laurels like a 15-foot human shadow in front of me. That kind of looked kind of neat. So I'm kind of, rocking back and forth a little bit and talking just like I would do. I just talking to Bigfoot. If I'm going to be out there, I believe they can hear or sense what you're saying. So I communicate. No, I said a few things. And then I came back over to where the other 3 of them were. AJ had gotten into the front of the SUV. Now, he's in the front passenger side of the vehicle. And I'm talking with Stephanie and her boyfriend, and we're, talking about different things and about, I can't even remember what we're talking about, but I decided to replicate one of the yells that I had heard in Arizona. Now, I didn't tell Stephanie and her boyfriend. I didn't tell AJ. But I turned around toward the vehicle, and the driver's window was open. So I didn't want to yell in the window or near that where, hurt his eardrums inside the vehicle. So I walked toward the back of the SUV, right toward the back, and I was facing that direction. I didn't think it mattered. So I just pulled my hands up to my mouth and kind of did this, roar, as loud as I could for about a half a second, just one quick burst. And wow, Vic, a half a second later, this creature, whatever it is, started stomping up at us. And it was like tree trunks. You could feel every step gaining speed, just bam, 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 coming up, breaking branches, just snapping off branches. I mean, I'm rushing toward the front, and this guy jumps in the back seat and slams the door on the driver's side. Stephanie starts running around the front of the vehicle because she's not going to go toward the back of it. That's where this thing is coming up at us. And AJ felt every step inside the vehicle too. He could hear it. He could just, oh my God, and I jump in, I start the truck, she gets in, and we go. And they're just yelling at me, go, go, go. That thing could just knock this truck over. Go, go. And I'm flying out through the mud, and I'm getting out, and we get about a half mile away, and I want to go back. And they're like, no, we're not going back tonight. No way. I'm not going back ever. And an hour and a half earlier, the boyfriend was like, oh, I'll fight Bigfoot. I don't care if he rips my arm off, blah, 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 beer muscles, we weren't drinking, but that's the way he was acting. But so next morning, AJ and I go back because nobody wanted to go back that night. Not even me, really. So we go back the next morning and we walk over there and we can see these like 2-inch round branches just tossed 14, 15 foot up into the laurels. You could see this path, but it was like, it didn't make a lot of sense. You couldn't see where it was stepping, but my God, the sound, I have never heard any animal make this kind of a charging, stomping. It was, I mean, it's like if you had an elephant that stood up and actually stomped instead of, they're very light on their feet, elephants, they're not like that. I mean, a rhinoceros, maybe if it was like twice the weight standing up, running at us, that's what it sounded like. There's nothing to compare what this stomping felt like. It was amazing. And like I say, we tried to figure out where it might have been watching us from. And it was about 50 yards down. And I play golf, so I kind of know where 50 or 60 yards is. And it was like this kind of a cleared out little area to where it had a good vantage point to see the SUV up there. Because that's where we would park to go hiking again. That's where we parked. And they had a good vantage point. But I believe to this day, it took us a while to figure out, but I believe that Bigfoot, if that's what it was, coming up at us, was coming up to protect us. That I did this aggressive roar that I was replicating, and it might have thought it was some other kind of creature or another Bigfoot or something that was going to hurt the four of us. So it exposed itself by rushing up to protect us, perhaps, and then realized that we're all scrambling to get in the vehicle, that we're all okay. It stopped. Because it must have stopped 10 feet from us. It felt like it was 10 feet away every step. I mean, it was just, you cannot fathom what this sounded like. I've heard of fast running. I've heard of lots of things, but never. And this is going uphill at us. And it was just amazing. Like it said, it sounded like 2 tree trunks stomping up at us, which doesn't make sense, but that big around, their legs, just huge. All right, let me tell you about something else. Okay, now we've been to that area a few times since. There is probably about a mile from there, an area where we believe there's a nest, but that's in another, next to a community, which is, odd in itself, but it's far enough, deep enough that they would never be able to find them or see them. And I believe, have sentries out there protecting their little ones or other things too. But we get back out there quite a bit. So let's see. I helped a couple of people. This one lady, I was riding my electric bike in an area and I stopped at this little shanty that they had selling, tapestries and beads and different things. So I stopped there and she noticed my Bigfoot shirt. She goes, "Oh, well, that's kind of interesting. I like your shirt." And I go, "Oh, thanks. I'm, part of the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Project." And he goes, her eyes like lit up, like, I got to tell you something. Do you got a minute? And I said, well, sure. So I said, yeah, of course. So she said, I had to sell my house. I lived in this area, and I won't tell you what area, but she saw a dog man. And I would say it was because of the description she gave. She said it was the most evil creature I've ever seen, Glenn. It was like 40 feet away from me I was in my house, my big picture windows, and this creature was just staring through me, she said. It knew where I was walking. It knew where I was. It could tell, I think. And she said it gave me this glare like, I just want to kill you. I just want to rip you apart. That's what she was saying. And I didn't coach her or anything. And I asked her about the ears, without, raising my hand or anything. And she grabbed her hand and she raised her fingers as high as they can go. They were huge. They were well high and pointy, like a Doberman's, except huge. And I went, okay, all right, good. I mean, you remember the face. And she said it was just this evil, gnarled, like, not, it was canine, but it was more evil looking, she said. Like devil, I don't know, whatever she kind of leaned toward. So she said that she put her house for sale. She sold it. She moved. She, and that's kind of scary, but I talked her down for about 30 minutes or 40 minutes. And I said, hey, I'll be back after dinner, and so I went and ate dinner and I came back and we talked another 20 or 30 minutes, but just to kind of calm her down. I said, the creature wasn't there to bother you. It's not going to bother you again, and there's triggers that I gave her to try and help her through this if it comes up in her nightmares or things. So I tried to help this, person. That's a lot of what our Pennsylvania Bigfoot Project is talking to people that have encounters and getting them through it. Because people, they're just not ready for it. You don't expect to see something like that. That's just massive. And the abilities and the speed that they have, can't fathom. Some creature can just jump 15 feet up into a tree. You don't expect that. I mean, there's some eyewitnesses that have told me some pretty bizarre things. We were going on another area near a reservoir. Now, behind this reservoir is a massive laurel fields or a laurel area. There's creeks going through them and all that. And I've always had a good feeling about Bigfoot in that area. I used to leave like little glow sticks or little trinkets, and half the time they would be taken. Adam and I went out there and we were hiking and we left a little glow turtle and he left a little blue shell. Well, the turtle was taken. The shell wasn't. Doesn't, okay, maybe the paint didn't appeal to him, whatever. But the glowing turtle, they liked. So they took that. But we were out there and this is a different night and I decided to talk like I do to Bigfoot. And I said, hey, do you want us to come to you or do you want to come to us? Give us a sign. Let us know. Well, talk to us or give us a sign. And Adam said a few things and we were just quiet, keeping our, wits about us, talking a little bit, but listening a lot. All of a sudden we started hearing these footsteps coming toward us. And they're coming from an area that's on the other side of this little creek. But it's solid wood, solid laurels and woods. You can't walk in a straight line in that type of foliage. And these steps were coming what sounded like in a direct line toward us. And it was bizarre because it didn't make sense that how could they walk? We're hearing it. Like, are they mimicking the sound of walking? Or it was just very bizarre. And so Adam and I left about a half an hour later, we said, well, let's leave our trinkets that we brought. We'll find a tree or we'll find something to mark them and we'll leave something. I think we were leaving acorns and dates or something that night. We tried different things. I can't remember that night, but we were also going over toward one of the other paths. And as we got maybe 10 or 15 feet into the path, I stopped and I got this bad feeling. And I said, Adam, we're not going in here tonight. There's something, not right. So we didn't. And I turned and we walked back out and we drove out. If I get a bad feeling, I'm not going to pursue it. I believe, I trust my instinct. It didn't feel like the right situation. Like something maybe was trying to trick us or trap us. I didn't like the situation. So we did not go in that side. And that's a lot of things that's kind of what happens. All right. Another time, let's see. We went up to hike out toward one of the lookout towers. There's a few lookout towers and radio station towers up in this area. And we were up there pretty high. We went up to the tower and we have to hike about a half an hour up there. And we have some parabolic microphones. We had a new gentleman with us. And we let him listen to the parabolic while AJ and I were kind of scouting the area around. And all of a sudden he goes, Glenn, come on back over here. So I came back over there and he says, Glenn, I'm hearing something. And it sounds like a siren, but it's a human, and I'm all right. Keep facing it right where you are. And I took my headphones off of him and put them on. So he didn't change his direction. And then I heard it. It was a howl. It was definitely a howl. It was long and then went up and then dropped back down, the sound. And then as Adam got closer, or AJ, I think it was AJ or Adam, I'm not sure for that day. But one of them came and I said, here, listen to this too. It was Adam, yeah. So Adam listened to it too. And he could definitely hear the howl. He heard it probably one of the best, either, the gentleman we were with or him. So this guy was so excited, like, hey, can I call my wife? I want to tell my wife. I'm like, sure, but with a parabolic microphone, it might have been a mile away because it wasn't up close, but we could tell a definite of that it was communicating to others from this howl. It might have been 2 miles away. With a parabolic, you can't really tell that far away. So he calls his wife, all excited, and tells her, and, we continue for another 40 minutes, and then we hike back down. And we're hiking down toward where that sound is coming from, because that's the way we're going out. But didn't see anything else that night. But there's a lot of interesting stories. Let's see, I mentioned the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Project. Mary Fabian is the founder of the group. I am the assistant director for the state of Pennsylvania. I carried the whole northeast region of Pennsylvania. So I cover about 14 counties personally. If there's anything going on, I go investigate, or pretty much the half of the state that's in the east. If there's something going on, I have someone in the south, but they broke up the individual counties. We used to have groups in every county, and we still do. It's just they kind of run it a little bit differently, the group now. So, if there's a sighting, we just contact that area and then we investigate it. And then one of us will follow up if we need to. But we get a lot of reports. On the Facebook group, we have over 20,000 members, and it's a private group. You have to, it's not hard. Just answer a few questions. And then we monitor any new hire or new recruits for 6 to 8 months or more, just to make sure they're not a troll or trying to cause problem with people. Because we'll just boot them off. Not worried about it. We don't believe in killing Bigfoot or anything like that. We call them research, not hunting, because we're not hunting them. We know better. They're protective. I'll tell you, if there's something going on in the woods and like say one of them's giving birth, and you've heard this a lot, that you hear people talk about hearing a woman screaming in the woods. And they don't know what's going on, and they go toward it, and they can never find it, or they get chased out of the area by a Bigfoot. All of a sudden a tree will get pushed down and the grunting will start. And no, they're not going to let you near a birthing area if you're a human going into that area. No. They might, gently nudge you, and then they'll get a little more aggressive. They'll toss little rocks or bigger rocks or whatever they got to do to persuade you not to go that way. Right up to whatever that takes. And that makes sense. And Bigfoot are protective of their families and clans, and I believe that they have sentries, and there's can go on and on. There's times where that they're there. I don't know how to put this, but they don't always make themselves known, but you'll see the birds react differently. And they do that for humans too, but when a Bigfoot is in the area, everything goes silent. It's different. You won't hear a cricket at night. You won't hear a locust, a whippoorwill, anything. All of a sudden, everything goes silent. Now, I don't know, and I've had this happen, I'd say 20 times in my life, that everything has gone silent. And I don't mean quiet. I mean silent. It's like everything in the world has stopped except for you and that creature, or humans and the creatures. I don't know if that's true, if that happens, I don't know. But I've walked into an area, you hear everything going on, you pass this certain tree and everything goes silent. It's weird. Death quiet. Well, let's see. That's about all I have to say right now on those. I don't want to get into other people's stories because these are my accounts and these are the ones. I've hiked into these laurels with Bob and other investigators where we had to crawl into these laurels. They're so thick. And you're trying to find these nests or trying to find areas, and it's very easy to get lost. I had a red cap on in the snow, and we went 5 feet into the laurels, and they were up above us, 30 feet above us, and they couldn't see us 5 feet in. We were gone. And that's with the red hat on, ski cap. So, it's a great camouflage. I do know that they are edible for some animals. Deer will eat the mountain laurels. They get inebriated from them. They get a little bit sick, but they get drunk or inebriated, it says, from the mountain laurels. So think about a Bigfoot. If they're a creature that lives among the laurels, for coverage, they can eat them year round, and it gets them inebriated. That's something to think about. When I was camping at Hickory Run Forest, Tim and I, one of our investigators, we went hiking around and we found an area below one of the other campsites. It's toward the creek. Probably there's like 3 levels from the creek up to where the campsite is. First level is, maybe 5 feet above the creek. And then the next level is like 5 feet above that. And then the campsites themselves is about 5 feet above that. So 3 levels. At the first level, just above the creek, I found 3 laurel branches that they had to have been carried there because there wasn't any, laurels right in that particular spot. All the leaves on half of each one of those branches were eaten off. Okay. Like they had broken off a branch about, 3-foot branch, round or whatever, all the leaves on it, ate all the leaves off of half of it and then left it and then grabbed another or had another one, ate half of the leaves off of that one. And there was like 3 of those there. Or there was 3 of them there and they got startled and had to leave. I don't know. But not many animals can break a branch off of a laurel, carry it to another area, and eat the leaves, but only eat half of them. Like they're just plucking them off, A deer wouldn't do that. It wouldn't break a branch and then carry it over somewhere. It would just, if it was going to, would just eat it off of the plant. You know, most littler animals couldn't do that, couldn't break a branch off anyway. So kind of leads you toward Bigfoot that can eat those kind of plants. They have, developed appendix where they can eat foliage, and, we don't know how their stomachs work or how their bodies work, but I'm sure that veggies are a big part of that. And we don't know what kind of calorie intake they can get from the laurels. I don't know. I haven't really researched that end of it, but that might be something to look into, because to support that big of a creature, you'd need a pretty good calorie intake. Obviously, other animals and other things that are abundant, but plants are important. All right. Well, Vic, I think that's about it for right now. I got to, save some for next year. And we are going out this week, so I'll let you know how those go.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. The sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. His pickup man had been through it, getting through the day on scrubs and skags, bucking hay bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, looking at the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, looking at the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Something going backwards and double time, looking at the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, fried chicken, porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.